Welcome to this tutorial about the service creation for IIP-Ecosphere. We will start with how to use the development container that we provide. We will shortly go over what the development container is and what it does, how we use the UI in the container, how we use the Eclipse in the container, how we save our progress to work on the whole service in multiple steps, and how to use the terminal in the container. The development container itself is Docker-based and packs everything you need to create for IIP-Ecosphere. It has a fitting Eclipse installed, it has the platform already installed and prepared. It's nice and portable if you want to work on a different machine and take everything with you. And of interest, it's running Ubuntu 20.04. On the first start, you need to make sure Docker is running. This applies specifically to Windows, as Windows Docker installations may be running through Windows subsystem for Linux. And there it isn't necessarily active, so you need to start your Windows subsystem and confirm that the Docker daemon is already running. To get the image and run the container for the first time, run the command docker run -p 6080 80. The -v is for mounting a volume to the container, so you would have a connection between the directory in the container and the directory outside. This is completely optional and you need, if you want to use it, to change it to fit your file system and your needs. And IIP-Ecosphere/dev container 02 is the most recent version. It's firstly the name and then the version of this container. The 02 might change, just refer to our Docker Hub and take the most recent one. This will also directly start the container and you can then access it through the browser by typing localhost 6080 into it and just loading the page. We will get into using the UI. If we start the container and look at the UI through the browser by typing localhost 6080 into the search bar, we will see an UI that has, or is probably not stretched. We will see a UI that's not stretched out through the whole screen. So what we need to do for this is go to the small arrow on the left side of the screen, as marked in the most left image. Expand this, go to the cogwheel on this, expand the settings, and there set the Skalierungsmodus to Lokales skalieren. This will stretch out the image, but only stretch out. The problem is it's not fixing the resolution. The resolution change is a bit more cumbersome as it will take the resolution of the screen on startup and load up. So you will need, or you will want to put your browser on full screen on the biggest resolution you have available and start it from there. This will set the default resolution you can choose in the container to your screen resolution. Minus the browser itself. It cannot be changed afterwards, only by stopping and restarting the container and then before accessing it this time, placing it in a bigger screen. Moving on to the Eclipse. We have a specific Eclipse installation. This is prepared with everything you need to access and work on the different files IIP-Ecosphere comes with, like IVML files or Python inside Eclipse in Java projects. So you first need to start Eclipse, you see the icon on the left, and then choose execute on the second part. It will not ask for a workspace, it will just start in a default workspace. This will initially be empty, you just need to import the project once. The path is root desktop Eclipse workspace. If you've imported the project from there once, it will always start into this workspace and there will always be the project ready for you. How do we import this? So as it's initially empty, you have the option to just click import projects and we'll move on to this window where you can choose existing projects. Then go to next. You then select the directory through browse. That is the path I've mentioned. As we can see, root desktop. And then we choose impl model in this, as this is the base for creating services through or with generated templates. We then go to open and then finish will be able to be clicked and we can import the project successfully. Container persistence. as we've now started a container from that image specifically, we might want to stop this because we are done for today. We want to work on this tomorrow. We want to work on this at another time. So we need to somehow store this progress we made. This can be done by stopping the container. To actually stop the container, you will use Docker ps to list all containers, all running containers specifically. You use then Docker stop container ID to stop the container. You might as well use the container name, but in this case you would have either have given it a name on start, or you could just use the predefined name. It doesn't change much. To rerun the container, you will use Docker container PSA, assuming you've not noted your ID elsewhere or forgotten the name, to list all containers, including the stopped ones. Use then Docker start container ID to rerun the container and have all your progress up until this point. You then load the localhost. You can even leave that window open. You just need to reload it once and then it will re-grab the image. For somebody coming from Windows, there might be some odd things about the terminal and how to use it. So, even though Eclipse has a Maven integration, we are relying on Maven for much of this whole process. It usually works best directly through the terminal. What I mostly did is right-clicking the project, like impl model on the image, going to show in and System Explorer. This does not work in the development container. You will need to navigate directly to this through the file system. So the Explorer on the bottom left side, we here also see the slight resolution issue, but it's way more workable if you are having the container in front of you. Navigate to the correct directory and then go to Tools, Open Current Folder and Terminal. Here we can now execute Maven commands. And after we've executed a Maven command, it usually should have changed something. After executing Maven command, we have a change in our project, there will be some new files, there will be some changes. As we're working through Eclipse to work with the code, we might need to refresh this, as Eclipse might not actually reflect our changes initially. So we select the project in question and start with, if there are errors present, Maven update. This just usually means that something isn't perfectly fine aligned in the project, and Maven update will grab the newest things the project needs defined in its POM file. If this is not the case and you're just missing a folder, like the folder with the templates that you've generated, you can go through the refresh. This usually should then list all directories Eclipse can find in the workspace in the project. Copying items into the container. Mainly meant for Windows, as if you're installing Docker through Windows and then probably through the Windows subsystem Linux, you might have some odd behavior if you don't know about this. To copy something, you use Docker CP. And the syntax is a Docker CP source and then destination path, with the container path, which one of both should be, being made up from the container ID and then the path. When Docker is installed through Windows subsystem Linux, you might need to add WSL in front of a command if you're executing it through your Windows command line or PowerShell. If you're executing the command from inside your Linux subsystem, then you don't need to do this. To actually copy something from the container to Windows, you should start your destination path with /mnt/, as this is how Windows subsystem sees the file system. An example would be /mnt/c/work, which would be the work folder inside our C drive. If you're copying from Windows to the container, you do not necessarily need to do this, as you can just start the process with a command line inside the directory where the file or item is you want to copy. Then you can just put the name of your item you want to copy, for example, text.txt, and then define the destination path. And this is then container ID and then the path in the container. An example of this is WSL Docker CP, C work text.txt, and then a container ID and root desktop as a path. To summarize, what we've learned in this slide set is how we start and utilize the development container and then work on it like it's our normal desktop, at least somewhat. How to go on. So as this is potentially the first video you will see in this tutorial series, you now can start with the first actual service creation video, which would be how to edit data types and move on from there.